Welcome to the CEDH Summer Slam, presented by Mayhem Comics and Collectibles. For this week, we're finishing up round 2 with a long, drawn-out game that I'm sure the players love to play. With that being said, let's check out the first pod today. First, we have Aiden on Marchesa Mad Farm, a Mardu list that seeks to use Marchesa for card advantage and assemble an Underworld Breach or Bomberman line. Josh on Zevlor 3-for-1, a Grixis list that seeks to use Zevlor's ability to get massive value out of already powerful cards. Tanner on Greasefang Stax, a Stax list that seeks to slow down the board and use Greasefang to reanimate a big vehicle. And finally, Pilch on Windgrace Lands, a Jund list that seeks to land Windgrace, generate card advantage, and win with combo or land-based beatdown. And now, with each pilot in their respective corner of the screen, let's continue the CEDH Summer Slam. And for those of you in the Ames area, stick around to find out how you can get 10% off your next Mayhem Ames purchase. Aiden draws and plays a Wooded Foothills, cracking it, paying a life, fetching up a Badlands on the battlefield, and passing. Josh draws and plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He plays an Arcane Signet and passes. Tanner draws and plays an Urza Saga. It enters and moves to Chapter 1. Tanner passes. Pilch draws and plays a Taiga. He plays a Mox Diamond, discarding a land as it enters, and follows it up with a Sylvan Library. In response, Josh casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 back on top. Sylvan Library resolves, and at the end of Pilch's turn, Aiden casts Entomb, fetching up a Savine's Reclamation into their graveyard. The turn moves to Aiden. Aiden draws and plays a Scrubland. They cast Rite of Flame, adding 2 red to help cast Azra Oddsmaker. Aiden passes. Josh draws, plays a Training Center, and passes. Tanner draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 2. He plays a Plains, a Thalia Guardian of Thraben, and passes. Pilch draws, plays a Scalding Tarn, and cracks it, paying a life, fetching up a Badlands onto the battlefield. He plays a Ramanom Excavator and passes. Aiden draws and moves to combat, discarding a land to Azra Oddsmaker, targeting itself, and attacks Josh with Oddsmaker. Josh takes the hit, and Aiden draws 2 cards through Oddsmaker. In their second main phase, Aiden plays a Bloodstained Mire, cracking it, paying a life, and fetching up a Plateau onto the battlefield. They cast a Wishclaw Talisman and pass. Josh draws, plays a Mana Confluence, and casts his commander, Zevlor, Elturel Exile, and moves to combat, attacking Aiden with Zevlor. Aiden takes the hit, and Josh passes. Tanner draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 3. He floats mana in response and fetches up a Jeweled Lotus onto the battlefield. He plays a Swamp for turn and casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a land as it enters. He plays a Dothi Voidwalker and casts his commander, Greasefang, Okiba Boss. He moves to combat, attacking Josh with Thalia. Josh takes the hit, and Tanner passes. Pilch draws, plays Scalding Tarn from his graveyard, and cracks it, paying a life, fetching up a Stomping Grounds on the battlefield, untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Sylvan Scrying, fetching up a Field of the Dead into his hand, and passes. Aiden draws, plays an Ancient Tomb, and moves to combat, discarding a card to Oddsmaker, targeting itself. They attack Josh with Oddsmaker. Josh takes the hit, and Aiden draws 2 cards. They play a Walking Ballista where X equals 2, and passes. Josh draws, plays a City of Brass, and passes. Tanner draws, plays a Command Tower, and moves to combat, attacking Aiden with Greasefang and Josh with Thalia. Both take the hits, and Tanner follows it up with an Oswald Fiddlebender. Tanner passes. Pilch draws an extra card through Sylvan Library and loses 4 life. He plays a Mountain from his graveyard and casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, Pilch creates 4 treasure tokens, and passes. Aiden draws and immediately moves to combat, discarding a card and targeting Azra Oddsmaker. They attack Tanner with Oddsmaker. Tanner takes the hit, and Aiden draws 2 cards. In their second main phase, Aiden casts a Felwar Stone and activates Wishclaw Talisman, fetching up a card into their hand and giving Talisman to Pilch. At the end of Aiden's turn, Josh casts Ad Nauseam. It resolves, and Josh reveals a Wooded Foothills, Vampiric Tutor, Luxury Suite, Resculpt, Jessica's Will, Wheel of Fortune, Swamp, Demonic Tutor, Steam Vents, Verdant Catacombs, Cabal Ritual, Gemstone Caverns, Bloodstained Mire, Windfall, and decides to stop there. The turn moves to Josh. Josh draws and plays a Luxury Suite. He casts Jessica's Will, targeting Aiden. In response, Aiden casts Reign of Filth, and Josh adds 4 red mana and exiles Dothi Voidwalker, Volcanic Island, and Talisman of Creativity. He casts Windfall. It resolves, and everyone discards their hands and draws 19 cards. Josh casts Mana Crypt, activates Zevlor, and casts Deadly Relic, copied twice through Zevlor, targeting Thalia, Ramanom Excavator, and Walking Ballista, which Aiden activates in response, killing it and dealing 2 damage to Josh. Thalia and Excavator are exiled, and Josh follows it up with a Mox Diamond, discarding a land as it enters, a Jeweled Lotus, and a Gitaxian Probe. He looks at Tanner's hand and draws. At the end of Josh's turn, Tanner casts Entomb, fetching up a Parhelion 2 into his graveyard. The turn moves to Tanner. Tanner draws and casts a Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Imperial Seal, fetching up a card onto the top of his deck and losing 2 life. He casts Deadly Dispute, sacrificing Mana Crypt, drawing 2 cards and creating a treasure token. He sacrifices Dauthi Voidwalker to cast Demonic Tutor, fetching up a card into his hand. He moves to combat and returns Parhelion 2 to the battlefield and crews it with Greasefang. He attacks Aiden with Parhelion 2, creating 2 4/4 Angel tokens, one attacking Aiden and one attacking Josh. Both take the hits, and Josh dies. In his second main phase, Tanner casts Ranith Magistrate and Rule of Law. The table groans, Parhelion 2 returns to Tanner's hand, Tanner moves to discard, and with the table looking for an answer, passes. Pilch draws and activates Wishclaw Talisman, fetching up a card into his hand and giving Wishclaw to Aiden. He floats mana and casts Obliterate, destroying all creatures, artifacts, and lands. He plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes. Aiden draws and plays a Mox Diamond, discarding a land as it enters, puts a Blood Crypt into play tapped, and passes. Tanner draws and plays an Arid Mesa, cracking it, paying a life, fetching up a scrub land onto the battlefield, and passing. Pilch draws an extra card through Sylvan Library and loses 4 life. He plays a Mana Confluence and a Dauthi Voidwalker. At the end of Pilch's turn, Aiden casts Enlighten Tutor, fetching up an Urza Saga onto the top of their library. The turn moves to Aiden. Aiden draws and plays an Urza Saga. It enters and moves to Chapter 1. They cast Gamble, fetching up a card into their hand and discarding a card at random, which is an Imperial Seal. Aiden passes. Tanner draws, plays a War Room, and casts Blind Obedience. The table groans, and Tanner passes. At his upkeep, Pilch casts Vampiric Tutor, fetching up a card onto the top of his deck and losing 2 life. He draws and plays a Nurturing Peatland, moves to combat, and attacks Tanner with Dauthi. Tanner takes the hit, and at the end of Pilch's turn, Aiden flashes in Cathar Commando. The turn moves to Aiden. Aiden draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 2. They put a Sacred Foundry into play untapped, paying 2 life. They cast their commander, Queen Marchesa, and become the Monarch. They move to combat and attack Pilch for 3. Pilch takes the hit, Aiden draws through the Monarchy, and passes. Tanner draws, plays a Swamp, plays a Cultivator's Caravan, and passes. Pilch draws and plays a Jeweled Lotus. He also passes. Aiden draws and Urza Saga moves to Chapter 3. They float mana in response and fetch up a Soul Ring onto the battlefield, which enters tapped due to Blind Obedience, plays a City of Brass, and casts Dam, targeting Dauthi Voidwalker. In response, Pilch activates Voidwalker, sacrificing it and flashing in Dualcaster Mage, copying Dam, destroying Queen Marchesa. Then, Aiden's Dam fizzles, and Aiden passes. Tanner draws and plays a City of Brass. He casts a Linvala, Keeper of Silence. At the end of Tanner's turn, Pilch casts Realms Uncharted, fetching up a Dark Depths, Thespian Stage, Glacial Chasm, and Maze of Ith. Tanner gives Pilch Thespian Stage and Maze of Ith, and the rest go to Pilch's graveyard. The turn moves to Pilch. Pilch draws, plays a Thespian Stage, and casts his commander, Lord Windgrace. He downticks him, returning Forest and Dark Depths to the battlefield, and passes. Aiden draws and plays a Phyrexian Tower. They cast Fragmentize, destroying Rule of Law, and follows it up with a Demonic Tutor, fetching up a card into their hand. They cast Ad Nauseam. It resolves, and Aiden reveals a Scalding Tarn, Timna the Weaver, Archivist of Ogma, Mox Opal, Simian Spirit Guide, Spectator Seeding, Flame Scroll Celebrant, and Vanishing Verse, killing them.
Hey, this is Jack. There was a miscalc on Aiden's life total, but they were dead anyways because it was all or nothing at that point. So, continue.
Phases pass and the turn moves to Tanner. Tanner draws and puts a Godless Shrine into play untapped, paying 2 life. They recast their commander, Greasefang, Okiba Boss, and immediately move to combat, returning Parhelion 2 to the battlefield. Tanner crews Parhelion 2 and attacks Pilch with it and Lunvala, creating 2 4/4 Angels also attacking Pilch. In response, Pilch activates Thespian Stage, creating a copy of Dark Depths, losing 1 to the Legend rule, and creating a Merit Lage token, which enters tap due to Blind Obedience. Pilch takes the hit, Parhelion 2 returns to Tanner's hand, and the turn moves to Pilch. Pilch draws and upticks Windgrace, discarding a land and drawing 2 cards. Unfortunately, with no way to deal with Tanner's board, the table sees the writing on the wall, and Tanner wins the game. For those of you in the Ames area who stuck around, come to Mayhem Comics and Ames this week and ask for the YouTube discount. You'll be asked the question, who won? Answer correctly and get 10% off your purchase.
Oh, it went great. I had a little foreknowledge that I was going to get targeted out, and that's exactly what happened. Although the ad nauseam at 21 life probably didn't help.
That was the longest game that I've ever played. So we got Josh out of the game super early because they're in first place, so we wanted to worry about that. And after that, it was just kind of a slugfest. All 3 of us are playing comboless, so there wasn't really anything that we could do, and I was just the most unfair of the fair decks. and I just got there in the end.
The game was great. Honestly, one of the most fun I've had in a long time. Just unfortunate that that rule of law ended up affecting it more than I thought it would after the Obliterate.
I actively wanted to kill myself throughout half the game. On like turn 5 or whatever, I thought about just casting a Final Fortune to kill myself so I could leave that hellscape, but yeah, it was not a fun game after turn like 2.
All right, at the end of that round, we have Harmless Offering still clinging to first with 140 points, but Tanner has put the Fish Feeders hot on their heels at 130 points. Time is running out for Cringe Copters and Viva la Revolucion, but the Copters have firmly cemented themselves as the second worst at 90 points, with Viva officially in last with 7. Just one more round and things are looking close. Will Harmless Offerings limp across the finish line, or will one of our lower teams come from behind in a blowout? Tune in next week to find out on the CEDH Summer Slam.